Welcome again to an FCP Quattro production. I'm Ken. You may know me at Peace of Mind Farming on IG. Along with us is Defino Hunter down below running the ones and twos for us. And here to my left, we have Luna Whitcomb today. Luna is known for moon-grown botanicals as well as being a soil scientist and overall wealth of information for the community. And today she's here to talk about everything from, I think, soil biology, microbiology, food soil web stuff, what we can do as living soil growers to have better quality products, and in general, best practices for making, growing the best medicinal plants and the healthiest medicinal plants.
I think that's what I think.
Yeah. So with that in mind, Luna, why don't you go ahead and take over? If there's something I missed in that introduction, why don't you just fill us in a little bit about your kind of your history, a brief history, if you will, and then
sure.
I'll get into some more pointed questions.
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me on. It's good to hang out with both of you. So yeah, I'm Luna. I go by Luna all day on Instagram. I am a breeder, a consultant, a writer. I've been growing since I was 20, so I'm 37. So for about 17 years, I've grown outdoor, greenhouse, fields, and warehouses, and bedrooms and tents. I've kind of just done it all. The plant is my entire life. I breed. I like to focus a lot on cheese genetics. That's really kind of where I put a lot of my attention. I really try to search for unique aromas, flavor profiles, as well as focus on yield and structure as well. So like I'm pretty much known for my soil science information, probably like biology stuff, compost teas, maximizing diversity in soil biology. I also do work with like enzymology, entomology, microscopy. I'm big on amino acids and just kind of all of the building blocks required to really maximize the genetic potential of the plant. And I know that we FCP has gotten kind of, I know that y'all got your other accounts pulled down, and so I'm kind of like reluctant to say the word at this point because I don't want you guys to get in trouble. How are you feeling about just openly talking about it? I know you've been taken down a few times now.
I don't think the word.
Go for it. Go
for it.
Talk about whatever you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
It's a 21 and over channel.
Okay, cool.
And it's it's that kind of thing. Educational purposes.
Yeah,
not promoting anything.
This channel is for educational purposes only, and anything here is for that purpose and that purpose alone.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And if you're in the chat or watching this and you don't qualify, you should leave now. Thank you.
So my stomping grounds are Northern California, but like more central part of Northern California.
Okay.
I've traveled all around the country doing consulting stuff, and even in Canada and things like that. But right now I'm in Oregon, and I've been here for 6 years. And so I did some growing in the Rogue Valley, and now I'm in Central Oregon, which isn't the best place to cultivate, but I'm making it work. But yeah,
you get a lot of sun. You get a lot of sun over there.
Yeah, it's really dry though. Here is the problem. So it's like
I was going to ask, what's the main problem there? Like, what do you face mainly there?
Humidity. In the summertime, it'll be like 5% humidity.
So you would be looking more towards a cultivar that's not so dependent on a high humid environment, like a desert, more desert style cultivar.
Yeah, but there's really nothing that you can just rock full sun outdoor here. Like you have to grow in a greenhouse, and even when we're running in the greenhouse, we're running misters. Like we have misters going the whole time. Like if you're gonna do sun grown, you have to be like constantly adding moisture, or keeping it covered. Like
so it's almost like you're at a leach point, like where it's leaching more water than it'll ever put out.
Yeah, pretty much. There's like a lot of like transevaporation going on the leaf surface, you know, like it's evaporating faster than it can replenish itself, and you'll see a lot of like curling and stuff like that.
Okay.
But you know, we make it work, and like indoors is possible, you know. And I'm doing a lot of stuff in tents right now, just in my backyard. I'm not working with anyone at the moment, but still rocking my thing at my place.
Yeah, and having that, you know, whatever, 3 or 4 months of drought each year here, you know, in Oregon, it definitely drops the humidity. I can attest for that. Over on this side of the valley, where we might have 95 to 100% humidity, and then, you know, 15 or 20% during the day. It's just,
that's crazy. That swing is
crazy. Oof. So the plants get pretty stressed out.
Where are you?
I'm on the west side of the valley, looking. So the camera's facing
in Oregon.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah. So like right over here is the South Sister, but it's kind of smoggy today.
You and I are
close. Or not smoggy, overcast. Yeah, just about 100 miles ish.
Cool.
You know, yeah, just over the hill. Yeah, I used to stomping grounds when I was a kid. We had family over in the La Pine area, so
sweet. Yeah,
we were back and forth.
Yeah, I'm in Bend.
Yeah, so it's you know, kind of that high desert, 3,500 feet elevation, roughly.
Oh
wow. So go ahead.
Have you tried like introducing any cultivars specifically from like any regions that are similar to that area, like in like Western, high desert Western Afghanistan or anything like that?
Yeah, so I've run, you know, it's hard to say that I've had like a pure Afghani that I've ran, but I have ran stuff that has Afghan in it. I wouldn't say it did any better than anything else, but also it was in the same kind of climate controlled environment as everything else.
Okay.
Like I wouldn't even dare try to just run stuff outside full sun. You'd have to at least do it, you know, like shade grown, which I will do here, which I have done here. And you know, like it grows and it flowers and it finishes, but it's not like.
Is it just because of the humidity, or is it the UV? Like, what's the combination of factors that you wouldn't grow it outside?
It's the humidity. It's really just the humidity and the little microclimates in Bend specifically. Like the more west you are, you know, you're going to see more pine trees. The more east you are, you're going to run into like sagebrush and juniper, and that's just within like a 10-mile distance.
Right.
It really just depends on where you're at. So like where I'm at now, you can't see it, but you know, there's pine trees outside, and it's a little bit easier here because we have like a little bit of canopy cover, and it's not quite as dry as when I was on the east side of town, and it's just sagebrush, juniper, and dust, you know. And like when we're out there, because it can get windy and because there's so much dust, you just don't want to do it outside. Like we were running it in a greenhouse. We had like a 5,000 square foot greenhouse, which we'll start growing in again. But my business partner at the time, he has to figure some stuff out. I'll just leave it at that. But I'll get back to running that greenhouse here soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, I definitely have heard of challenges in that, you know, in that area of cultivating.
Yeah, there's just dust. Just if you want dusty weed, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're on the wrong side of town. It gets a little crusty.
Yeah, for sure.
So I was going to say, to compensate for that, you're running misters in the greenhouse, you know, all summer long.
Which would be
pretty much
climates.
Okay.
You know, like just running straight misters. You know, there's so much moisture, it would just rot everything out, and we like can't do it without it. Yeah.
So your soil is, you know, it's living soil, so you can run that at a really high saturation level as long as its porosity is there. And that brings me to, your expertise as a, soil scientist. Your official training in microscopy and entomology and your other, botany, et cetera, et cetera. Where did you go to school for that, or how does that play into this overall picture of creating the perfect environment in a greenhouse in your living soil system that'll benefit this ecosystem that is so incredibly harsh outside of the greenhouse?
You have to create your own ecosystem, pretty much, right? And of course, you're going to attract like native pollinators and insects and little critters and stuff. Like we get a lot of blue-bellied lizards and blue-tailed skinks. And then there's a lot of frogs that come in, and like butterflies, and isopods can be a problem. But inside of the greenhouse or inside of even just like a tent grow, I always try to introduce every piece of like an ecological system. So we're going to start with our bacteria. We're going to use microscopy to identify protozoa counts. Make sure that all our different types of protozoa are present in the correct volumes, and we can tailor compost teas to add them if we need to. Typically, I'd like to introduce living mulches or companion plants, and those root exudates will really create a living space for the protozoa. And I think that that's a more complete way of mimicking an ecosystem is with companion plants, and then the protozoa can exist in that soil. You don't have to monitor it as frequently. And I like to stay away from mulches because in this particular area, since there are a lot of isopods, when you have a lot of mulch that starts to decompose, the isopods can come in and they take over. And that's a pretty common problem that I see in living soil systems, especially when they're using mulch, even just like, straw, is that the isopods move in and they just start to wreak havoc on everything. And since those isopods don't have a natural predator, like to complete that soil food web, like I don't know, some kind of lizard or something like that, they get out of control. So in the summertime, when we would have isopod breakouts, there were tons of lizards that would show up and kind of keep the populations down. And that I think is functioning. But in the wintertime, like we would start like breeding projects or do just like winter runs, whatever. And since those lizards weren't around in the wintertime, the isopod population would explode. I'm getting a little bit off subject. But then like introducing other predatory mites in the soil system, like Stratiolaela scomitis. I'm big on just predatory mite as preventative, and then introducing them to like a living mulch as well to have like somewhere for them to live and to feed off of and stuff like that.
For a home grower, like what do you think is the most practical, whether you're, starting out for like an indoor, like a cover crop or something that can really bring those protozoa, the root exudates and whatnot, that'll provide a better environment for the biology and the microbes to, benefit the plant?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a few options. A lot of people, they won't use living mulches at all in an indoor situation because it doesn't have as much light intensity, and so it tends to like stretch out. And you have to pick a living mulch that doesn't have really deep roots, and that won't really compete with the feeder roots of our cannabis plant, right? And so not planting it super dense is one way of doing that. Planting things with shallow roots is another way of doing that. I was experimenting with under canopy lighting to keep things a little bit more stout. What I like to use and what I've been using recently is alyssum, which is just, really beautiful white and purple flowers. And it adds an element of beauty and aroma to the whole setup that I just really love. And then in outdoor settings, it would attract pollinators. People like to...
I had some over winter this year because it didn't really freeze in the valley.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
People will like to add different like dynamic accumulators or things that will fix nitrogen or pull nitrogen from the atmosphere and introduce it into the soil. I think that someone's promoting my SoundCloud things. I think that is a solid practice in outdoor situations, in indoor situations, or I think that the dynamic accumulator approach is a good idea in like fields and in some situations outdoors when we're meticulously balancing our soils with, like Malic 3 and saturated paste tests and re-amending and stuff like that, I don't feel like it's as big of a deal. I think that what we should focus on is using a living mulch to maintain soil moisture and ensure that we have a lot of protozoa, like place for protozoa and for microarthropods to live, our predatory mites. Alyssum doesn't like pull a bunch of nitrogen from the air and introduce it into the soil. It's not, it doesn't secrete like phosphatases like buckwheat would, but it's a great way to attract pollinators to, and also to house our predatory insects, our predatory mites. And it's really pretty. And that's another one that people really like to use, which I haven't tried yet, is, I'll get into that in a second. Another one that people have liked to use recently, and that's become really popular, and you'll see with like, oh my God, I forget their name. Green Life Productions. They're using dichondra, which is
dichondra.
Yeah, dichondra.
Yeah.
Which has very shallow roots. It won't penetrate the soil surface. And it won't grow super tall and like compete with the light box of the cannabis plant. And it's not going to like throw petals into your buds kind of thing like alyssum can. So you can, that's also another really good option. It's not really like a nitrogen fixer or solubilizer. It doesn't have any like crazy root exudate that's really gonna improve nutrient cycling either. It's more of like a moisture retainer. But I think in these systems where we're really prioritizing nutrient balancing, by hand through like re-amending and testing and modern day scientific approaches, I don't think that those things are as important. Those dynamic accumulators and those plants that have root exudates that make certain nutrients more available. If you're running into a problem where like, you don't have enough phosphorus that's available, like your cation exchange sites haven't bonded to enough phosphorus, like after you do your saturated paste test, like sure, introducing that could be a good idea if it's necessary, but if it's not, I think that it's important just to focus on things that maintain moisture and create homes for protozoa. And so the answer is like, it depends, right? As it is with everything, it depends. And some people will ask like, how much am I supposed to inoculate a microbe and how often do I do it? And it's like, well, it depends. Like, does your soil have the proper environment for that microbe to thrive? Then you should only have to inoculate it once. You know what I mean? And if it's going to stay there and multiply and live in that environment, then that's it. And it's like, is your soil drying back? Does it not have enough organic matter? Do you not have worms in it? What is the profile? Are you pumping it with some kind of funky thing? Like what are you doing? And so
that's real.
And that's my long-winded rant to your pretty simple question. I like to use alyssum, is what I've been playing with recently. But in the past, outdoors, I liked buckwheat, and I would probably still maintain some buckwheat if I am to grow full sun outdoor, which I would like to do here soon. But I'm setting up some living soil facilities out east of the country, and so I think I'm going to get out there and do some different companion plant stuff. But
yeah, it's definitely your climate and your environment limits some of those options.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
If you're outdoors.
We did get a question from Squishy Mirror. Can root exudates from aromatic herbs like basil have an effect on cannabis aroma and flavor?
Pull that back.
So yes, but not for the reasons that a lot of people might think. Like, you're not going to plant basil and then have the aroma of basil directly translate into the plant. So the way that aromatic compounds work, our secondary metabolites, our volatile organic compounds, is they're biosynthesized through the genetics of the plant using different precursors and cofactors, which are, enzymes, carbon skeletons, organic acids, amino acids, and those root exudates from that particular genetic of plant, not necessarily cannabis, but basil, buckwheat, alyssum, whatever, they'll secrete a specific profile of amino acids, enzymes, carbohydrates, organic acids that will then allow for the biosynthesis of those aromas to express through secondary metabolites, through aromatic compounds in those plants themselves. And that profile can allow for the biosynthesis of those aromatic compounds within the neighboring plants around them. But if that plant doesn't have the genetic capacity to biosynthesize that profile of thiols, phenols, aldehydes, so on, terpenes, that aroma just simply won't come through. So you're not gonna take a basil plant and surround your cannabis plant with it, and then have the aroma of basil come through in your cannabis plant. But let's say you have a cannabis plant that is extremely floral, and you take a bunch of floral plants and you put it around, the cannabis plant, is more likely to encourage more floral notes to come out of that plant, because the plant actually has the genetic potential to do so. And it's not because the aroma is transferring through, like as if you were to put like food dye in like a white flower vase, you know what I mean? It's not going to work quite like that. It's more of, it's setting the stage for the environment for that plant to have the potential to biosynthesize it. If that
Sure.
makes sense.
Well, so that kind of goes in.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you had a thought.
Well, my thought was, if you plant these aromatics around your, main cannabis plant, the cannabis plant wants to shine brighter. Maybe it wants to be loud, maybe louder. There could, that might be bro science, but at the same time,
well, when you have more of those enzymes, amino acids, carbohydrates, and stuff like that working together, in like a living mulch or a companion plant situation, like the plant will have the potential. It has the precursors and cofactors that it requires to biosynthesize more aroma compounds. So so definitely. So like, and that's just having like a fully functioning living soil, or like a fully functioning ecosystem. Like if there's more of the building blocks required to create aroma in the environment, then it's going to create more aroma.
Well, so it kind of goes into like one of the questions I was going to ask you about growing like food alongside your cannabis plants. So one of the things I was going to start doing this year is like growing beans and pumpkins alongside my cannabis plants, and kind of like the Three Sisters style. And instead of using corn, using my cannabis plants as a corn stalk, and seeing how that works. But then the issue I see coming up would be like pest pressures. What would you see with any issues, and like what would your advice be in that kind of situation? Like, would you do something like that?
So immediately what I think of is if you're gonna have bean stalks growing next to your cannabis plant, is they're gonna climb up it and wrap around it and potentially suffocate them. And you're also creating a lot of density of leaf matter inside there for pests to hide. I was on a farm one time and they had morning glories growing, which is a climbing, vine plant, and it was wrapping around the stalks of the cannabis and just constricting it and suffocating it. And you'd see the limbs that were being wrapped around, they wouldn't be developing as well as the other ones. So that's the thing that I would be the most cautious about. If you were to really keep an eye on it and train them and make sure that they're not on the cannabis plant, like set up some kind of like trellis structure, that would probably be okay. But you're going to be out there every day making sure that it's okay. The climbing vines on the ground, like your pumpkin or your squash or cantaloupe or some kind of melon, whatever. I don't see as big of an issue. I would definitely grow in an abundance of soil, because those root zones definitely will compete with each other. But if you're not trying to go for like huge yield of the cannabis plant, you just really want to like do this thing, go for it,
Okay.
But that's the thing that I'm, because just as like cannabis growers, we're always like yield.
Yeah. So you're thinking about, so the things that are coming up for me are like the competitiveness of the bean and how it's going to squish, basically like suffocate the plants out. So you wouldn't really want beans growing up at like it would with a corn stalk technically. So, and then the root zones on the pumpkins or any vine growing ground plants would compete with the cannabis plants. So you really do want more of a clean kind of cover crop that only has that 1 to 2 inch root zone that goes down, so it doesn't actually get into that cannabis tap, that
Yeah.
cannabis root zone.
Yeah, definitely. And try not to plant it super densely. However, what I think you could do though is if you planted your pumpkin in a different soil volume, and then you had the pumpkin covering the soil of the cannabis plant, like you train it to like go in this direction, and use that as a way to maintain moisture, like a little microclimate on the soil surface of your cannabis. So like you have your pot with your pumpkin, and then you train the vine to go over the soil of the cannabis plant. Now it's acting as a living mulch. Now it's creating a microclimate. It's not competing with the soil volume of the cannabis plant. It creates shade for microarthropods.
And it'll just get your soil fired. I mean, firing.
Okay.
I mean, if it has that microclimate.
Exactly. And then you'll start to see like feeder roots really create a dense layer from the cannabis plant on that soil surface because you have a nice shade over it, and then just hit them with like earthworm castings and insect frass or whatever amendment that you want to use. And then those feeders will just eat it all up and it'll just blow up.
Yeah, that's great information. So I'm going to put a 20 gallon.
Because I imagine as a home grower, or if, once home growing actually does start catching on, hopefully it does start catching on. Once it does, like, I want to be able to grow my food alongside. I want to be able to have a garden that is sustainable, that can work together, and how I put the plants together in that garden matters. Now, also, how are the root zones going to compete with the exudates that are coming off of those plants? What plants do you not want to plant around your cannabis plants?
That's a good question.
So the first off is going to be things that compete, things that share pathogens and insects in common, right? So squash is susceptible to no brassicas. Brassicas actually, their root exudates secrete a compound that competes with mycorrhiza.
Right. So you don't want brassicas.
No brassicas. Yes, thank you for reminding me, because I was just about to be like, oh, I don't think there is such a thing. But no, you're right, brassicas. So definitely things that are going to compete with the root zone, things that are going to share. I don't know about lettuce specifically. I think lettuce should be fine.
Yeah, as long as it's not in the brassicas and rape seed.
Yeah.
That whole family.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I know a lot of people like to use clover because it, is like nitrogen fixing and solubilizing and stuff, but clover can get aphids and not be
ants
good.
love clover. Ants love clover, and then ants bring in the aphids, and you're just dealing with a huge mess, and it's not worth it.
It's a cycle.
Oh, absolutely. So definitely just things that share pathogens, and so like what I was saying, like squash can get like powder mildew, clover can get powder mildew, but that powder mildew species won't actually spread to cannabis. There are certain pathogens that are specific to certain plants. And so it's careful to just do your research. And I don't have the answer of every single thing that you should avoid, but I would definitely, and now AI makes it kind of easy. You can be like, hey, what kind of
I think bush beans would be a good way to go.
What did you say?
Bush beans would be a good way to go. I mean, if I know that some varieties of bush beans don't fix the nitrogen. But like the black-eyed peas and field peas, they're not the same, but they're tasty.
Cool.
Cow peas.
Cow peas.
Yeah, they're tasty. I mean, they're edible and abundant.
Yeah.
Fixators. Yeah. But yeah, I'm looking out across the gardens and things that I'm, as I see some mustard seed or some sort of brassica that's flowering over there from last year. And I'm like worried it's going to get into where I'm going to plant my cannabis, and like, no, I don't want that seeding the whole, I've got like a hugel mound, or more back to Eden style, but very heavy mulch area that I don't want seeded with stuff that otherwise would impede my flow.
Yeah,
So you know, growing for so many different environments, particularly here in the Willamette Valley, we're able to hold a lot of the moisture, although it's getting more and more difficult to hold the moisture with the mulch. The mulch has to get deeper and deeper, but it is, I use outdoor like drip irrigation, much like yourself, I'm sure, with your greenhouse, metered, making sure that, the reading the plants is important. Um, what kind of, you know, stresses that can be mistaken for like low humidity and things like that um, might mimic some other deficiency that is actually related to, like an environmental thing that, that you might know of, or
so what kind of stresses mimic deficiencies that could be environmental?
Yeah, like, you're in extreme, thinking extremes,
Yeah,
extremophiles.
sure.
Go ahead.
So I mean, so nutrients antagonize and synergize with each other. And what that means is when you push and pull on one nutrient, through deficiency or excess, it pushes and pulls on other ones. And this will happen because of the way that cation exchange sites work, right? One of the common problems in living soil systems is we see that our cation exchange sites are oftentimes saturated. Oh my God, stop texting me. Are often saturated with potassium, and they lock up those sites so that calcium can't exist there. And calcium, it pulls on a lot of the other different nutrients. And when it's out of balance, a lot of the other nutrients can't get uptaken by the plant. And this kind of ties into environmental things, because when you have that push-pull, you'll see certain things be more available or not. And when they're too available, you'll start to see vascular burning in the plant. And when they're not available, you'll start to see like deficiencies in the plant, typically like yellowing, right? Or funny kind of stripes and things like that. But this can also be caused through improper plant transpiration. So the way that physiology works is the moisture gets absorbed through the roots, the nutrient ions, they travel through the moisture. And then as the plant releases moisture through its leaf surface, the nutrients transport. They move like osmotically, right? And so when the leaf can't like move that water appropriately, like it moves it too fast and it's not able to transport the nutrients with it, the nutrients can accumulate in the leaf surface and it looks like burning. Or they're not traveling quickly enough and it's just not moving nutrients at all. And you'll start to see deficiencies because your environment is not correct. So you can see deficiencies, you can see purpling of the stem, yellowing of the stem, because your environment is not correct. And this can be high humidity, low humidity, high heat, low heat. You'll start to see deficiencies. And that's one of the big things that I'm constantly talking to people about when I'm doing consulting services, is they're like, oh, I have a nitrogen deficiency, and I keep pumping it with nitrogen and it's not getting better. And I'm like, oh, tell me all of the details about your cultivation, your growing, your watering habits, the water tension that you have, what MBAR is it sitting at? What are your environmentals, blah, 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 blah. And, I'll find out that they're rocking like 45% humidity and veg, and they have an electric heater blowing on their plant or something, and then we fix that environment and the plant just immediately recovers. You know what I mean? So it's always, when it comes to diagnosing issues, we're very taught in the cannabis industry that like, this is this deficiency, therefore you have to give it this nutrient. But really the diagnostic and reversal of plant health or increasing of plant health should really start with eliminating all potential variables that could be contributing to your plant's like improper health. And so the first thing is look at your environment, look at your humidity and your temperature. And then the second is going to be look at your water quality. And people are like, oh, I'm growing with, I live in New York and I'm growing with tap water. And I'm in, and I don't have a filter, and everything is
I
going.
have a nightmare on that. I have 380 ppm of bicarbonate in my well, and the well that we moved from, which I'm looking at right now, like they're 200 feet apart, 5 ppm, 380 ppm.
Yeah, that makes things super difficult. What are you gonna run reverse osmosis filter on your well water to water your plants with? Like the best you can do is like sediment and carbon. When you're trying to fill 500-gallon tanks or 1,000-gallon tanks or whatever. And then
those water things that people don't understand. What kind of symptoms can using bad water, like you said, in New York, where there's higher iron and ppms of have different metals.
Yeah, like your chlorine and your sodium. Sodium is like the big one. Because when we're building our custom living soils, we try to avoid runoff as much as possible, because our nitrogen, our nitrates, our phosphates, they're very water soluble. They get rinsed out, with runoff. And so we do our best to eliminate runoff in our custom built living soils, because our potted soil mixes, they don't behave like growing in a field. They don't have all the other ecological factors that would replenish nitrogen and stuff like that. We try to mimic them as much as we can, but it's simply just a different situation, especially when we want the soil to be really high performing for cannabis. So when we do no runoff situations, or we avoid runoff in our irrigation practices, if your water is contaminated with chlorides, bicarbonates, high sodium, etc., you're going to start accumulating those things in your soil, and they're going to start, hanging on to those cation exchange sites. They're not going to let nutrients up, and then, like sodium will just, keep nutrients from being absorbed at all. And if you have high chloride and high sodium, now your microbiology is just going to fall apart, and people will be like, oh, I'm, adding, bottled inoculants all the time, and I'm still getting like rots and stuff like that. And like, why am I getting stem rot and all these things? And I don't understand like what's going on. And a lot of the time it's because, they have high sodium and high chloride that the proper microbial populations can't get established. And it's because they're using water that isn't cleaned. I mean, we're doing these no runoff situations in no-till or living soil systems where we're trying to avoid nutrient runoff. Sometimes you just need to run off your nutrients to get that sodium and stuff out of there, and then replace it.
Do you get your water out of the Ogallala aquifer there in Kansas? Do you get that good water?
I'm not in Kansas.
Oh, no, I know. You get your banned municipal water comes straight off out of the canal, isn't it?
I have a question about municipal water. Do you ever notice that there is times they'll change the makeup, and that you have to change what you're doing to your plants according to that?
Let me make sure I understand your question. So, you mean like the inconsistencies in water throughout the year?
Yeah.
So,
in municipal water, mainly in the inconsistencies in municipal water throughout the year. Because one thing I've noticed is in my water here, there is times a year where they will dump chloramines in the water. And I can tell, and so like, because my filter gets just clogged up, and like it's not hard to tell. But then there's times where they won't use chloramines and they use strictly chlorine, and so like, how does that impact the water you're using?
That's good.
I mean,
good
a lot,
point.
a lot. So the difference for anyone who isn't familiar, chlorine, chloramine, chlorine will evaporate. It's meant to keep microbial blooms down in our drinking water. And chloramine, same, but chloramine has been adapted by water treatment facilities because it doesn't evaporate. And that creates a big problem in plant cultivation because it's meant to keep microbial blooms down. And especially when we're not having runoff situations, it's going to accumulate and just destroy your microbiology. I have been pretty blessed to live in places where I've had really good water quality, but I still run reverse osmosis, so I never have to worry about it. But then when you're running reverse osmosis, you have to be really careful to not have runoff because it's even more likely to carry nutrients out with it when you do. So to answer your question, with that kind of long-winded preface, you can always do things like aerate your water, but even with chloramines, you have to add like a bunch of fulvic acid to it, and then it bonds with those chloramines to then allow it to be evaporated. And you're not going to know whether or not that a change has occurred unless you're perpetually testing your water, And so really the only way to get around that is just run an RO filter. Which
I hate to hear that.
It sucks, but it's kind of like the world that we live in. Or, you can run it into a big holding tank, constantly add fulvic acid to it and have a big air stone in there. But then you're likely to get a bunch of bacterial blooms. You got to keep the sun off of it completely, and you have to try to keep it somewhat temperature regulated.
How do you feel about the chloramine filters that they have out there?
I've never tried one. I'd be suspicious that they work. What exactly are they? Is it just a carbon filter? Is it a sediment filter? Like does it actually work? And also a lot of the time, I've asked people I've asked like local water municipalities for like water tests of like what is in their water, and you'll get a test back, and then you'll run a test yourself by sending in a water sample, and they're completely different. Yeah. You know what I mean? And the same thing with soil that you buy from people too. I'm not gonna say a name, but I got a soil test from someone. And it was perfect. It was 6.5 and the ratios were all immaculate. It was like, wow, it's the best soil that anyone's ever seen in the world. And then, it shows up at my place and I get it tested and it's 5.0 pH and the fucking calcium is non-existent and the potassium is way over here and there's no trace minerals on the fucking thing. It's just, you got to do all your due diligence yourself. You really, and I hate to be like, you can't trust anybody, but you can't trust anybody.
Yeah.
Like they have like THC tests, like everything's 15% over what it actually is. And, everyone's going to use the best soil test that they've ever had to sell their soil with. And everyone's going to, it's just how it goes, and like the water municipalities they're going to send you the test that they got that was within the legal limits, to everyone that asks for it. And if there's ever something wrong, it's your fault. It's your pipes. It's something you did. It's just how the world works. And welcome to capitalism. And just
or at least late stage, right?
Absolutely. And you can expect that there's going to be fluctuations in your water contaminant levels based off of like the weather too, because the heat will loosen up stuff on the pipes and stuff like that, and the cold will change things and different weather patterns, how much rain there was and stuff like that, how much runoff there was into the water supply from whatever minerals in the area, maybe there's a particular insect bloom that season that affected things, like who knows. So it's like you really just got to do your due diligence with everything. You got to take your water, get it tested yourself. Don't ask for soil tests. Don't ask for water tests from the municipality because they're not going to be what you actually have. And the same thing with soils. Like if you want to find out which soil is going to be good for you, like go buy a bag of it, test it yourself, and see if you want to balance it yourself.
Well, I've even found, so I did that when I first started like going consistently indoor. I tested 3 different soils. I sent them off. I spent the money to actually have them tested. And I didn't just test one of each bag or one bag of each. Like I went back multiple times, getting multiple different bags, having the soil tested to see which one, was the most not clean, because none of them were clean, but the most consistent. Mm-hmm. So that way I could manage, what I'm feeding the easiest. And so I found one that worked the best, that was the most consistent across the board and had the least amount of contamination. And that's what I went with. And I still use it to this day.
Great. Yeah, perfect. You should still continue to test it though, because different batches from different inputs will fluctuate in nutrient density as well.
Okay.
Always. Like especially if it's like ocean-based stuff. Like more mineral-based is going to be a little bit more consistent, but just, you know, what was the health of the kelp that year? What was the health of the shrimp that year, the crab that year, you know, the fish that year will affect the nutrient density of that byproduct: fish bone meal, crab meal, shrimp meal, kelp meal, you know, things like that. And even like if it's a manure-based compost or something like that, like those things fluctuate based off of animal health and activity, which is all constantly changing in our oceans and on our, you know, and on land. I can't talk sometimes.
Your
So
brain's
I have the same problem.
My brain going too fast. My brain to get me talking about soil, and I'm just
it wants to say 1,000 things at once.
You know,
I love to see the passion.
Thanks. It's what I do. This is what I do. It's what I love to do. So, and I mean, like, it's kind of disheartening for me to just be like, oh, nothing is consistent and everyone lies. But if you want, you really want to thrive, you really want your stuff to be the best, you really want to kill it. Like you gotta do the work, you know? And
yeah. I agree. I was concerned. I found the water, you know, we were having problems with our water heater scaling up. So I was like, there's no way that, you know, I looked at the water tests that, you know, because the well was drilled a few years before, you know, a couple of years before we moved into the place, as you need a well and power before you can start building. And, you know, went from 50 ppm to 380 ppm by the time we moved in. It's just, that's kind of a scandalous.
It's tough. You know, there's a lot of different factors to juggle. And, you know, growing plants is easy, but it can also be very complicated.
Yeah, you know, the first year I grew it was definitely a learning experience because the water, I wasn't aware of the water issue, you know, and since then, you know, there's been a lot more use of the rainwater. We have a big, you know, 1,500 gallon, but I use about. Can you give me a bong hit before you run off? Sorry, that was over here. But using the rainwater off the shop, you know, and things like that go a long way. But
super
just a drop in. Yeah, but we only, you know, again, we have that dry period where there's no collection for, you know, July, August, September, and into October.
Yeah, it can definitely be tricky. You're a lot greener over there than I am over here.
Yes, it is pretty green. Unfortunately, it's monocrops. Well, actually, you know, a lot of grapes, a lot of sour grapes, and
is that grapes behind you, or those blackberry bushes?
Those are blackberry bushes in the foreground, and then my neighbors have a small dairy with the beef, you know, dairy beef thing where we get our grass-fed beef and milk. And then it's pretty much like 1,000 acres of vineyards around us, like off in the, you know, just out of focus, you know, perfect, just where it should be. The rolling green hills of the Mount Pisgah AVA.
Have you ever fermented premature blackberries before?
I will if you tell me lots of good things about it.
Right.
Please. I've got hundreds of acres, hundreds of bushels.
Great. So it's a meticulous process, but premature fruits in general are going to have a higher organic acid density. And so if you harvest them and ferment them in their premature form, you're going to really harness those organic acids. And then you can dilute them and water them into your soil and just kind of add what would mimic root exudate. So it's going to be enzymes, organic acids, and carbohydrates inside of them. And depending on what it is, you might get some amino acids as well. But fermenting premature blackberries is something that I really love to do. And whenever I have them around me, I do it. And I make sure that I stock up on fermented premature blackberries, they're going to have a lot of like jasmonic acid inside them as well. So you'll see like big growth spurts when using them. But just a simple FPJ works.
So it's using the premature fruit for the FPJs. That takes us into some KNF, which is on the list of things that I was wanting to talk about.
Sure.
You're pretty good at running these things.
I'm walking right in.
I've done a few podcasts.
Yeah, but this is my third, so or fourth, yeah. But fermented. So just doing a simple FPJ. I've got some OHN, so I'm halfway there, right?
Yeah. So I have not had formal KNF training. And a lot of people will be like, you shouldn't talk about KNF unless you have formal KNF training. But I'm gonna do it anyway.
Don't drink it.
Yeah, I mean you can. People can.
But yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Luna.
And I feel like I have to preface this conversation because some people are very, very they follow the KNF system very religiously. But it's taught that you need every component of the KNF system, from IMO to the brown rice vinegar to the FPJ to the water soluble calcium.
But I got sold on the OHN.
And the seawater. Yeah, I mean, it's a tincture. It's going to have a diversity of polyphenols and polysaccharides. That act as prebiotics. That's legit. There is some information out there that'll say that using compounds in garlic will actually interfere with the sulfur or the synthesis of sulfur-based aromatic compounds. And I just upset a bunch of KNF people. And
I grow garlic in the same pots I grow my urban.
Yeah. There'd be something to pay attention to.
Yeah, I will.
And I've found just through playing with KNF stuff, just because I've been around a lot of KNF, I know a lot of KNF people. I've had a lot of conversations with people really respected in the KNF industry or in the KNF scene, like Chris Trump and Steve Reisner. I mean, I have a lot of respect for it, but I am not a strict KNF practitioner. I will use components of KNF systems because I think they have merit. But I also have like adaptations to the system that I use as well. The foundation to me, what KNF is, we have our microbial inoculant, which would be IMO. And I believe that there is replacements for that, such as earthworm castings, insect frosts. It's a microbial component, right? Then we have our enzymatic component, which is our brown rice vinegar. And I believe that there's other enzymatic components that we can introduce, such as sprouted CTs, or just, there's products that are like fractional distillations of bacterial enzymes like SLF 100. And then, people say that the grain component is really important in that enzymatic source. And so maybe, sprouted CTs is a better alternative. And then we have our organic acid enzyme, nutrient source, which is going to be FPJ. And for a long time, people were saying that FPJ is not a nutrient source. It's not meant to be a nutrient source. It's strictly for enzymes, carbohydrates, and phytohormones. There's been extensive testing on FPJs since then that shows that FPJ does have nutrient density inside of it. It does have, depending on the input, it can have quite a bit of nutrients inside of it, actually. And this is like verified through testing. And Steve Reisner has a whole website, filled with information from testing those FPJ inputs and their ppms in each nutrient. And so what I will do is I'd like to make compost teas, and I'll make sure that I have that microbial source, that enzymatic source, with my FPJ, because if you use an FPJ by itself, it typically either doesn't work or it'll burn your plants. You have to have a microbial and an enzymatic carrier, or it can actually be more harmful than beneficial. A lot of times people say that even soil drenches with FPJs or KNF inputs isn't ideal, and that it all should all be foliar applications. But
it just creates a buffer.
I think it has a lot to do with the potency of the enzymes. and carbohydrates inside of an FPJ, and like you need the bacteria to kind of like feed on that. Otherwise, it'll sit there and it can like, you know, ferment. It can create like acetone even, and it can like mess up your plant, you know, or vinegar. It can change, you know, it's sugar and plant material. Like it can do a lot of different things. You know what I mean? And so having like beneficial biology paired with it is pretty crucial. And I've seen quite a bit people just making FPJs and watering in FPJs, and it creates problems for them. But through my experience, I've used FPJs a whole bunch of times, and like plants genuinely respond to it, like without doubt. And there's a lot of conversation to be had about, you know, whether osmotic extraction, which is, you know, sugar and plant matter, even has the potential to pull like phytohormones into the solution. And there's, you know, debate. I'm not going to get too into that of whether or not that's actually happening. But objectively, I have used FPJs many, many times, and they objectively create a beneficial response in the plant. And that's kind of my take on KNF, and I'm probably going to get people messaging me later about it.
Oh yeah, you're going to get so much. The Korean diaspora is going to come after you.
Totally, I respect the hell out of those people because they're very like we just want to be close to the earth, close to Mother Nature, use natural
process focus,
and help regenerate the earth. And like I respect the shit out of that, and I love that, and that's what I'm all about too. I always just look for nuances in everything that I do. And there's been times where I've integrated things and I believe that it did a certain thing and I found out that it didn't and it wasn't helpful and I just backed off from it. So I never fully am like, this is exactly how it works and this is the way that the only way to do it or the best way to do it, because we're constantly learning. We don't know everything. And that's one of the coolest things about soil and ecology is that there's tons of nuance to it. And we can get into, you know, there's all these other external factors that kind of contribute to that, like horizontal gene transfer, you know, like how when high bacterial densities exist and the bacteria itself is so close together and copulating that they pass genes from one bacteria to the other and actually rapidly change species and become something completely new, you know, and like all of a sudden there's a new species of bacteria because it has a new like genetic structure because the other bacteria were bumping up against it so much, you know, like how do you anticipate stuff like that? And how do we classify all the different types of bacteria that's even possible? There's just a lot going on. Anyway.
Yeah, you have to get down on that level.
Yeah. It's just a lot. And then you know, and then in KNF systems, you know, the IMO, it has, you know, that bloom, that mucor or rhizopus, you know, that lower fungal bloom, which within its fibers, it can hold a ton of endophytic bacteria. Like it'll just be full of bacteria. So like those strands will just be chock full of biology, and it can multiply inside of it. So you can take like the indigenous microbes and multiply them inside this filamentous strand, but also not all of the biology is even capable of multiplying inside of that environment. And it creates all these different variables and stuff like that. And so you're harnessing indigenous microorganisms, but also you can't create a mirror of the exact biology through that media because it requires minerals, it requires enzymes and carbohydrates that don't exist inside of that media. And so like, yeah, you're collecting indigenous microorganisms. No, you're not creating an exact mirror replica of what is in that environment.
And trying to, you know, in vain, a lot of times people are trying to create that replication, but, you know, getting close to it, trying to figure out what the best practice is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's where, you know, you're consulting, you know, knowing many ways or more than one way to get to an end product that's, you know, quality end product has been something that, yeah, you can steer things in different directions if you know that what's going on below the surface. Again, you know, if you are doing the microscopy or getting it going, soil testing. That's one thing that I think people are willing to spend, $100 here or there, but getting a soil test seems like something that's, $100 is for a soil test would be a waste somehow.
Yeah,
but if it would increase the quality,
but you know what though?
talk on that for us for a moment. If it's
for sure. I have a buddy, and he's very strict KNF practitioner, and he never tests his soil, and he does no-till, and he's done like 40 runs in the same no-till soil, and he's never amended ever, and he just water only and KNF foliars, and his plants are just stunning, like over 2 pounds of light and just frosty and perfect. And he subscribes to the belief that as long as you keep the biology thriving and mimicking an ecosystem, that you don't have to re-amend. And like, maybe there's something there that I'm overlooking, and that's totally okay. It's cool that I'm wrong. And if there is something there, some piece of information that's yet to be figured out, or that's just simpler than I'm making it, like, fuck yeah, and like, if you do something and you want to pave your own way, like, go do it. You know what I mean?
Let me argue with the devil's advocate side of that. You would imagine, let's imagine a forest floor, right? None of that biology needs to have nutrients added to it. So you would assume that all of the plants, all the biology that's there already has what's necessary to continue its growth and continue its cycle. You would imagine you could do the same in any other environment, so long as you're playing to that environment, right?
Absolutely. Yes. And there's some things to consider when talking about like old growth forests and like fully functioning ecosystems and stuff like that. So like mycorrhizal networks, while paired with, mammals and insects and reptiles that exist in those old growth forests, you can have an animal that runs around, eats all the different plants, digests it, and then excretes it. They take a shit, and then the mycorrhizae will actually transport nutrients from where that animal, pooped, to a plant that needs it, 100 yards away, and that creates an ecosystem that's almost impossible to replicate inside of a soil bed.
So you're almost wanting to. The only thing we're lacking in replication is how the plants are consumed by movable subjects in the environment.
Yeah. So like, you need all of it, right? If you really want a fully functioning ecosystem, you have to have every single component, from bacteria to protozoa to mites, insects, reptiles, lower mammals, larger mammals, and then the diversity of plant life that dies and adds carbon and breaks down, as well as the fungi that'll break it down, and then it replenishes everything. And obviously, you can't have a mammal running around in your garden, pooping everywhere after it eats your plants. So we have to be that element. We have to be the one that's adding that element to the plant, to the system. And another thing that is often overlooked as well is the grazers that remove the root systems from that ecosystem to create aeration and stuff like that. So while we do run no-till, and you need your worms. I can't believe I didn't mention worms, and nematodes for aeration. But all of those components have to be there, and I think that if you were to completely emulate that system, you might not ever need to amend your soil. I still think it's a good practice to get your soil tested. You should do it anyway. But if you could create a fully functioning ecosystem somehow,
have you seen the work that Yellow Skunk Farm has done with his ecosystem?
I'm sorry, what?
Yellow Skunk Farm.
Oh yeah. Josh, okay. I was on.
Yeah, exactly, Josh. Right.
You were on with Josh not too long ago.
Yeah, Josh is a friend of the community.
Yeah, I like Josh. Okay.
Yeah, he's great.
He's growing a bunch of my genetics.
Yeah, of course. I wanted to bring him up. Shout him out. and since we're in that, he is the man scattering his shit across his environment, so to speak. He is the top mammal. He's the king.
He's exactly. He's the one filling in that gap. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Well,
right.
I think he's only one of the pieces. The thing that I find interesting that you were talking about is how there's multiple animals. So he's the larger predator in that environment, where he also has, his turtles, his fish, his shrimp, all the isopods in there and everything like that. So he's just one part of the movable objects within that system that is continuing the growth in there. Mm-hmm. And I don't think without, even if that system was self-sustaining, I think it would still be necessary for a predator like him to be in that environment in order to keep it going.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it takes a long time for those ecosystems to be balanced, and so when we're talking about like adding carbon, it might be as simple as like, oh, let's add, like wood mulch kind of thing. But if it's in a ratio or rate that it wouldn't have happened to mimic a balanced system, like in a forest, whatever, you can actually create problems, create things like isopod blooms and stuff like that. So I mean, it's we strive to mimic ecosystems, but the likelihood of creating a perfect one is pretty unlikely. But I mean, what you're doing is wicked. I love it, and it's the closest thing to a fully functioning ecosystem that I've seen in the cannabis industry ever, definitely. And who knows, maybe if he just left it alone and didn't touch it, I'd be curious to see if he could just leave it alone and not touch it and see if it just like ran itself. But he's doing fantastic work. I love what he's doing. And I'm definitely not trying to throw shade or say that what he's doing isn't what he's doing, because he definitely is. And I love the passion. I love the ecosystem that he's built. But yeah, these systems take forever to really be established. And so like an old growth forest and our soil beds are just practically just like with practicality, like you're not gonna.
No, I had some exposure to those as a child in Western Oregon. Yeah, it was cool going for walks through places that were just like Fern Gully.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
I wanna smoke some of that old growth forest weed that people used to guerrilla grow back in the day.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
I'm not encouraging people to go destroy national forests, but it would be cool to try it. Definitely don't do that. Don't disturb our old growth forests. But people used to, and be cool to try that weed. But definitely don't go do that. Anybody?
No,
don't go do that.
Especially with there's some. I don't want to get. There's some controversy with the Forest Service and the glyphosate executive order to produce more glyphosate to harvest the national forests, and it's kind of a big deal. I suggest people check out is it Mother Earth News or someone along those lines.
Yeah.
Stay up to date.
I've heard about that.
Yeah. And on that cheery note about the growing out in the forest, you never know what somebody next door might spray on your weed.
Yeah. Well, while you're talking about somebody else spraying something on your weed, I mean, obviously for home growers that are growing outside, there is one major issue. Not every home grower is in a metro environment. Some of us are on the outskirts, and some of us have planes who will spray crops that aren't too far away. How far does the residual from those planes come over, and what really can I do about that in my grow?
Good point. Good thinking. Good question.
How far? I don't know. I mean,
if I
knew enough about the half-life of all the different pesticides and the modern pesticides that they use, I might be able to give you a better answer. But that is a particular facet of plants and cultivation and agriculture that I don't pay attention to chemical pesticides. All I know is I don't use them and I don't want them around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't have that information. I apologize. I mean, what can you do?
Yeah.
Pray? I don't know. Fucking, you could try to put like a HEPA filter on your intake. You know what I mean? Like you could wrap a HEPA filter on your intake and hope for the best.
I'm not so much worried about inside, you know, it's more like the outside and stuff like that. And it's not like directly right above me, but still, I mean, when you got plants being sprayed even like half a mile away, it's like, how far is the residual coming from that? You know, what happens to the plants? I'm growing for medical reasons. So, you know, like it gets into all of that. And like I want to make sure I'm doing the best for my plants, and so like, is there a way to remediate that through soil biology?
No. Sorry. Yeah. No, not really. I mean, we're all subject to our environments, and some things we can't control. That's kind of just one of them. I mean, who knows which direction is the wind blowing in? Maybe you could put some huge fans up.
right, yeah.
You could.
Well, the wind is the biggest factor as far as I'm concerned. You know, if they have certain regulations on what they're spraying, and the wind there's a coefficient that goes along with it. Mm-hmm. How, you know, the drift and the elevation of the wind speed, the temperature, it all matters of RH. But for I'm grateful my neighbors are an organic, you know, vineyard. If I get any drift, I call her up. I called the missus up and I'm like, hey, I can smell your sulfur in the air, and they stop treating their plants. They don't want to poison the neighbor.
Yeah, for sure.
It makes my mom really sick. So, but there's a lot, you know, in the Midwest where they're growing a lot of monocrops, GMO stuff. Not that they don't grow plenty of monocrops and GMOs here in the Willamette Valley. We don't get as much spraying, aerial spraying. Smaller fields, probably why. But I saw the purple truck on my way back from the doctor on Wednesday, down the road on the flatlands in the grass seed field. And if anybody that lives in knows the purple truck, or the purple stuff that comes out of it.
Purple truck of death.
It's the purple truck of death.
Yep.
Yeah. But we're getting, you know, speaking of, you know, soil death, you know, I was an early grower, you know, a young lad, you know, just within the last decade or so, maybe longer, depending on who you ask. Hydrophobic soil. How do you keep, you know, your soils during the, you know, I stack my pots up, I put them on a piece of Panda, you know, I try to keep, you know, I don't have a greenhouse, so I just try to keep everything from leaching away and not getting too dry. I cover crop everything with radishes or turnips or whatever. Cool. You know, something that the goats will eat that I don't, that if the worms don't eat it, the goats will. Talk more on that for me, like hydrophobic soil.
Preventing hydrophobic conditions or fixing hydrophobic conditions?
You know, we should say, number one, an ounce of prevention, because rehydrating things is a pain in the butt. So let's start there. You know, getting the soil mix right is important, of course.
Right. So, it's going to depend on what your climate is. But if you have your soil on native soil and you keep it covered, it will pull moisture from the earth into it. Periodically going out there and spraying it, but having like leaf litter on top of it, things that act as a mulch that can also decompose, that can feed the worms and maintain microbial activity, and maintain moisture. That's what you're going to be after. So having it in direct contact with the soil, and I know you're talking about, preventing leaching and stuff like that. So you don't want to like water it until like runoff, and you want to keep it covered to the point that the rain isn't going to just wash it away. So like a lot of leaf litter material, and even like sticks and twigs and stuff like that. And almost like kind of turning it into like a compost pile. And even adding worms to it if you want. So if you're growing in a bunch of individual pots, you probably don't have the most thriving worm population, depending on the soil volume that you're using, soil volume of pots that you're using. So adding some worms to it could be a good idea. But
they'll definitely add that biology as well. Castings hold moisture, as well as bring back some moisture content.
Yeah, definitely.
Without disturbing the whole soil mass.
And
what do you consider a small pot for outdoor growing?
Anything under 100 gallons.
I love it. Okay, so I have one 100 gallon. So yeah, that's why I grow small plants. And do you grow outside at all, Andy?
I think you're muted. Wait, you're muted again. You turned it off. Or you turned it back on. There you go. Say something. It says it. There you go. You're good now. We can hear you now.
We heard him for a moment.
Please. I grew up in the
This is a trick question. Did somebody clip that? Sorry. So losing the moment. So red wigglers, preferred worm of choice. Have you found any?
Too.
Night crawlers.
So preventing hydrophobic conditions for sure. Once you have hydrophobic conditions, we're going to want things with saponins in them. So like yucca, aloe vera, but also things with like fats, right? So like fish emulsion is also going to be really good to break that surface tension. So like a little bit of yucca, a little bit of aloe, a little bit of fish hydrolysate or fish emulsion or fish amino acid. It'll break that surface tension pretty quickly. But sometimes it does take just breaking through that puddle on dust stage, which every outdoor grower knows what I'm talking about, where you just water it and it just sits and it doesn't penetrate. And then even if it does penetrate, it's only penetrated like this much and it's just super, super soggy on top of like dust. Sometimes it just takes watering it over and over and over and over and over again until you break all that surface tension and hydrophobic tension, which I've had to do before.
In one of your 7,000 gallon pots.
Huh? What?
And you're growing in 500 to 7,000 gallon pots.
I wish I had a 7,000 gallon pot. That would be wicked. No, usually they're 400 gallons.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, I prefer 700 to 1,000, obviously. So
they're two cubic yards, 18 inches, 2 feet deep.
Yeah, they're probably pretty deep, about 4 feet in diameter.
Grassroots, living soil pots.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you can get your hands on.
Okay.
I mean, when I was in Southern Oregon, like there were people that just had like fucking holes. They just had like a 10 by 10 hole, you know, that they just put soil in, and then every year they would buy another yard of soil that they would just add to it, and they would just add to it, and they would just make their holes bigger and bigger and bigger. And there were even people that would do crazy things. They would just like buy a cow, and then they'd like quarter the thing, and then they'd bury this fucking cow carcass like 6 feet underground and cover it with soil and then plant on top of it. Like people do some crazy shit. But there are people out there pulling like 20 and 30 pounds of plant, and everyone's like, no, that's not possible. But like, you know, they're the old time folks that don't fucking post on Instagram. Those are the people that are really fucking crushing it. And they're doing stuff like that, you know, they're doing crazy things. I could turn the camera. I buried a cow.
They're right over there. About 6 miles right over there. They're pulling down 15, 20-pound plants.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a thing. People don't believe
and there's cow carcasses and you know, and automobiles and all sorts of things buried out there.
Yeah, they got their old boat that they buried underground, and
exactly
next to their dog and their turtle. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's a thing.
All the most loved possessions, and it's 420 somewhere, mountain zone. All you people out there, I have a my dear brother who wants to put like fiberglass boats or bury them in the hillsides. Hot tubs, anything that will hold water, and kind of build like a pool to a pool to a pool to a, you know, and I'm just like kind of freaked out by putting fiberglass everywhere on the property.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, when we can just be like, we can get a pig, and the pig will do the same thing, and he likes pigs, and he likes eating them, so I think that's a win-win as far as permaculture goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want a little water holding, get a pig out there like Sepp Holzer, and make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I have always wanted to grow in a swimming pool though.
I think Peter's growing in a swimming pool somewhere.
Is he?
I'm not certain about it. He is. I think there are some. I have a neighbor who doesn't use their pool house. And so the bottom of the pool comes up if they don't have water in it. And I told him, I was just like, you could get a couple of 1,000-watt lights and pull down, 10 pounds every 4 or 5 months. But they're not that kind of people.
Right.
Just like, I don't need that kind of stress, he says.
Yeah, for sure.
And he doesn't need the kind of stress to keep the pool maintained either. So,
right.
But that's a whole nother level of chemistry that I don't need to get into.
One day, I'm gonna build like a greenhouse over a pool hole.
Oh.
And keep it environmentally controlled and grow a single plant from seed. Start it like, I don't know, in September or something, and light augment it and have it grow all the way through winter and all the way up until June, and then let the regular sun, take care of it, and just have like this massive plant. One day I'm gonna just grow the largest plant ever. But
in the right environment, I see something like an acacia tree, or with a big round stalk.
And I'll just build a tree house in it. Anyway,
invite your friends over, go up for a smoke.
Exactly.
I've
heard that about Subcool. Yeah. The indoor pool towards the end. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
What other? I'm looking here at my notes. And you mentioned earlier your take on FPJ or KNF or whatever, YMCA. Your mama called about.
Now we're just talking shit. But anyway, yeah. What was that?
Exactly. But other homemade things that we can that are practical. You mentioned earlier, like fats, and I think some of us have experimented making FAAs and gone through that painful, brief period of pain that later on it isn't a problem, but you know, FPGAs, anything else, abundance, um, any kind of abundance that you might have on your property, the permaculture way, turn it into some sort of a input for your garden. What would you say? Go ahead if you have any thoughts on that.
So new growth tips of pretty much anything, as long as it's not poisonous, are going to be really high in organic acids and enzymes. Obviously you're going to stunt the growth of whatever you're pulling it off of. So keep that in mind. But new growth tips have a lot of auxins in them, a lot of growth hormones, a lot of, just phytohormones in general, organic acids, enzymes, stuff like that. So pulling the new growth off of whatever you have. Stay away
acres of blackberries.
Exactly. Excuse me. Dandelions are great. Doing FPJs is one way to do it. You can also do lactobacillus-based fermentations, which pretty much everyone knows about. FPEs, fermented plant extracts, which is super simple and easy, and I'm a huge fan of.
I will swear to those. Testament.
And every year I'll make a new batch of labs and then extend it either through an FPE or AEM or both. An AEM would just be adding more water and more molasses to it after you've created the lactic acid bacteria serum and extending it. So I like to have at least, for my tent grow right now, I only have like a 5-gallon bucket, but in the past it was always at least one 55-gallon barrel, if not multiple, with that, that I would add like once a week or something like that. And you can throw pretty much whatever in there. Like stinging nettle is great.
How frequently do you think, like from usable to usable? You say you're rotating your barrels. Are they all having different components in them, or are they just like you have like Dowding? Charles Dowding has like a firm, like a finished pile of screen stuff that is ready to go into the seed starting pots. I'm just getting maybe that's a poor metaphor, but you have something that's ready to go on the plants, and then other things that are and then other things that aren't ready to go on or are still brewing and fermenting.
So usually, like people typically say 3 weeks of fermentation at least. And that's so that your pH drops to a particular level, because your lactobacillus it prefers acidic environments.
And that's like at room temperature kind of thing. I know lactobacillus likes room temperature.
Yeah. And also it'll thrive around like 80 degrees, whatever. So it'll take room temperature, but it can also multiply faster around like 80 degrees, up to like 85 degrees. Most bacteria will. But that doesn't mean we want our root zone to be 85 degrees. Anyway, but you do want your lactobacillus to remain dominant in the culture because it can just start to putrefy, and that's not what we're after. We're after like a lactobacillus-based fermentation, and we want active lactobacillus species inside of our ferments. And so if you're perpetually adding new stuff to it, you're creating an environment that the lactobacillus does not want to thrive in. So you can test the pH of the ferment and make sure that it doesn't go over 4 every time you add something. But once you're getting it above that 4.0 threshold, you're discouraging the rate of multiplication of your lactobacillus. And that's a big thing to keep in mind when we start talking about fermenting cannabis leaves or just any plant matter that is very alkaline. It can be very difficult to ferment with lactobacillus-based fermentations, FPEs, because it keeps the media, the water, at a higher pH that the lactobacillus doesn't want to multiply in. And I get people talking to me all the time about their failed cannabis leaf FPE, and they don't understand why, and they followed the instructions and they did everything step by step. And it's just because alkaline more alkaline plants will be more difficult to ferment. And what you can do is you can add a little bit of apple cider vinegar and kind of nudge it in the right direction, and that'll help
Exactly.
that problem. And that kind of just leads me to a completely other subject that's off topic. But I see a lot of people chop and drop all of like their defoliation when they do defoliate their plants. Cannabis leaves are extremely alkaline, and if you chop and drop too much of it onto your soil surface, you will raise the pH of your soil, and you can see lockout issues, burn issues. And what seem to be deficiencies that aren't deficiencies, it's your pH that has gotten too high because you're chop and dropping a very alkaline plant. Everything in moderation, right? And like imagine like you were in an old growth forest, you're never going to have all of the leaves of a plant just fall onto the ground. Like they can take pieces of it, like if a leaf gets droopy and it falls, that's fine. But if you're stripping your whole plant and dropping it on your soil, you're asking for problems. So yeah, that's the main thing when we're talking about making FPEs is maintaining the proper pH of the ferment.
Yeah, keeping it down.
Mm-hmm.
That keeps the pathogens away.
Yeah, keeps the pathogens away, keeps it properly fermenting, and so on.
Digesting and whatnot. Do you need to take a break? Get away? Get up?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
My back is kind of starting to hurt, but it's okay.
Well,
I'm old. I'm not that old. I'm 37.
Yes, I will. I believe 52 next year or in December. Yeah. So I feel you.
Yeah. Maybe I just need to turn the air conditioner on.
There you go. It's not quite air conditioner weather yet. Not in this part. We're in the, like I said, we get that evening onshore that you can pretty much look into the west from here. You can see the top of the clouds that bring in the onshore and high humidity spikes each night. But it blows out every morning. It's for the most part by noon it's clear. And it's like I think Central California coast has this similar sort of in and out kind of thing going on.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're gonna get that kind of like mountain ranges nearby.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you a little bit more about you did your breeding work, with the people. You yellow skunk did your the raspberry cheese and the lunar cheese and he had a lot of your packs. I think he got one of everything.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, for sure. I love that Josh is running my genetics in his I forget what he calls it, but in his little ecosystem, regenerative soil system or something that he calls it. I love that he's doing that. Yeah, so right now he's running my raspberry deadhead, which is growing better than anything else that he's growing. I'm very proud of myself. And he grew my Trinity skunk. He grew my alpha skunk cheese. I was actually fortunate enough to get some of that Trinity skunk that he grew that cycle and smoke it, and it was super fire. But yeah, so I've been breeding for a while now. The first farm that I learned how to cultivate on was a living soil farm, and the guy that I guess you would say he was my mentor or my teacher at the time, he was obsessed with breeding. That was all he cared about. Like sure there was flower being grown there, but the seeds and the breeding was really like his big thing. And he was always trying to focus on new aroma profiles. Like that was his thing, was if you can create something new that smells strong that no one has ever smelled before, then you've done it. Like you are a real breeder kind of thing.
And replicate it, and right?
Absolutely. Like really,
yeah.
and he was such a cool guy. He's still alive. I don't know why I'm talking about him like he's dead. I talked to him the other day, but he's still alive. There was just very interesting genetics that were unique to that area. It was in Concow, California, the 530, if anyone's familiar with it. And,
I've heard of it.
Yeah. Do you know what I'm talking about? You know about Concow?
Just a little. No, I've heard of it because I'm 503.
Oh, okay.
So we get confused.
Cool.
Dyslexic, you know.
Yeah. But like green crack came from there, and there were some really interesting things like Megalodon and Blue Knight, and like Kryptonite was really popular out there.
I see. I have Blue Knight on my. I have Blue Knight here as well.
Do you really?
In my notes.
No, you don't. You wait. You have.
Blue Knight I have it in my notes. Oh. I don't have any Blue Knight.
Okay.
No.
I was about to be like, dude, I'm coming over. I'm coming over. I'm coming to get it
talk about the Blue Knight.
So I made my lunar cheese with so the foundation of it was made on that farm, right? And we worked on it together. And it was with Blue Knight, which is a blueberry on Kryptonite, and then on UK cheese. And there was a whole bunch of things that we were working on. I was on that farm for a number of years. And he gave me things to continue to work on my own that I took, and then I when I no longer worked on his farm and I was doing my own thing, and I had my own facility and I had my own farms and I had my own greenhouses, and I ran with those genetics, and I got his permission, of course, his blessings to do so. And then that area, it all burned down during the campfire in Paradise, Concow, and Oroville in Northern California, which was like the largest California wildfire. Ever happened. And yeah, I'm sorry. What were you gonna say?
Oh, I talked with Daniel Morford about that and the ongoing efforts to reforest that area. I think I might bring Daniel on soon. Have him talk about that a little.
Oh, sorry. I was reading the thing. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just got excited.
Oh yeah, of course. Go ahead. You can't. All those folks were devastated in that area.
Yeah.
And the national forest burned, and then they got way out of control.
Masonic Smoker, I'm gonna hit you up on Instagram. I will.
Excellent.
I will trade. I will buy. I will do whatever to get that.
Nice.
The Blue Knight is one of my all-time favorite genetics ever. That was really popular out there. I'm glad that it was saved. I mean, that's a miracle. Well, I mean,
so many things were lost up there.
Oh, absolutely. And my buddy that I've been referring to, I hit him up because I was like, do you have Blue Knight seeds? Or like original Kryptonite seeds? And he was like, yeah, I do. Like, I'll send them to you. He hasn't, but I hope he does. But I still have, the genetics are alive in my lunar cheese line. And even my raspberry moon cheese line, because then I use the lunar cheese to make the raspberry moon cheese and then to make that line. And now I'm working an older, completely offshoot line of genetics, which is blue cheese on UK cheese, that I found. It was I had done part of the project. I had already gotten to the F2, and then I'd found different phenotypes and selected them. And I have 7 different selected phenotypes from the seed breeding project out of, I don't know how many we would run. It was some stupid number. I mean, it was definitely under the table. We would run an obscene amount of plants. I have them all. I found them in a safe in a storage unit that I had in California after I moved to Oregon. That I just had left there because I needed to leave really quickly, and it was right after the campfire. It was a situation had occurred where I wasn't safe there anymore, and it was a long story. I won't get into, but I abandoned the seed breeding project and I went to Oregon, and I went back and I emptied it recently because they were like, "We're going to sell your unit if you don't pay us and empty it out." And so I went down there and I threw $1,400 at them, and I was like, "Let me empty out my unit." And in a safe, I found this old seed breeding project, which I'm now currently trying to revitalize. And they're all firm husks and difficult to germinate. I did get a little bit of germination, but I'm not happy with it. And to just take whatever germinated and turn it into a breeding line is just kind of crazy. So I bought a rock tumbler. I was talking to my friend Steve Reisner, who I've repeatedly mentioned in this podcast, but we talk pretty regularly, and we were just kind of having a chat on Discord the other day, talking about the seeds that I had found. And he had kind of mentioned like, oh yeah, you know, there's like seed husks of like pumpkins, like giant pumpkins and stuff, where like if you don't sand them down, they will not germinate, you know? And I was like, how does something like that even exist in the wild? You know, like how do you have a seed that won't germinate unless it's sanded down by a human? And he's like, oh, you know, like they'll blow around in a field like on sand and have sand like blow over them for extended periods of time and sand them down. And I was like, sanded down by sand. I was like, yeah, fuck yeah. And so I went and bought a rock tumbler, you
Genius.
know, and put like the coarse grit of the rock tumbler in the rock tumbler with like 50 seeds, which I just posted about on my Instagram today, actually. And they're tumbling right now. They've tumbled for about 24 hours now. I checked after like an hour, it didn't do anything. Like 6 hours didn't really do much. And so now they're just running for probably days until I can like obviously notice like that the exterior of the seed husk has really worn down. And then I ordered gibberellic acid from Phytotech Labs. And so I'm going to do multiple side-by-side germination techniques. One with gibberellic acid, one with, you know, like hydrogen peroxide, H2O2 soak, one with fulvic acid soak, one with just enzyme soak. One I'm going to sprout corn and try to harness the gibberellic acid and enzymes from a sprouted corn. And then, you know, one with, you know, maybe a combination of things, and then with a gibberellic acid, and see if I can really revitalize these old seeds that I have and get good germination enough to the point where I'm comfortable actually having a breeding project with it and not it just being some bullshit pollen chucking thing. And I'm going to do a lot of like pheno hunting outside with them as well as inside. And start like a blue cheese UK cheese, like older blue cheese UK cheese stuff that was originally started on this property in Concow, and then, you know, re-release it because good cheese I think is pretty hard to find these days, and I've kind of been known for like being like the cheese girl now. So yeah, so that's what I'm working on. But I have I have 3 different lines now. I have a whole bunch of different seeds that I sell. The lunar cheese line, the skunk line, and then the raspberry moon cheese line. The skunk line was a collaboration. I don't want to talk too much about it because I'm kind of sour about it. But it was a collaboration between me and Purple Caper and another party that I don't want to talk about. And the results were good. They're solid seeds. You know, there's stuff like skunk aroma in a couple of them. And but the genetics are fire. The Trinity skunk is fire. The Alpha skunk 21 R2 is fire. The lunar skunk is fire. And the Verde is also very good. Some of them are not super skunky, but they're still solid genetics, and a couple of them are very skunky. And then the raspberry moon cheese line was also a collaboration with Purple Caper, but about half of the genetics in that line were provided by him through tissue culture, and the other half were things that I had in mother form. So yeah. So I got a bunch of different seeds. My seed sale just ended, but if anyone would like to snag something, if you just tell me, like if you hit me up on Instagram and just tell me that, or wherever, that you were watching the show and you heard that I had seeds and you want a discount, I'll extend the sale discount to you.
Happy May Day.
Yay, May Day. Yeah.
May Day sale.
So yeah, so that's what I got. That's what I got.
And your website.
Yeah. So moongrownbotanicals.com. Rock tumbler for rocks is like bird watching. Yeah, this doesn't go very fast. But yeah, so I mean, I have these seeds. Actually, but this is what I fucking had. These are just 3 of them. There's actually like another 5 different phenotypes that I selected, but I got a whole bunch to try over and over again to get good germination with different techniques on seeds that are 10 years plus old. So.
Excellent. I recently ran into a problem with some germination, and I thought the same thing, like about sanding. Yeah, I had the nail file out and with a pair of like hemostats holding the seed, and just like, this is insane. Trying to just get them to crack open. They were hemp seeds, like CBD, CBG, and they're just hard as a rock.
Yeah, they're even after soaking them, I'd try to like pinch them and break them, and they wouldn't break. I ended up taking a pair of pliers to some of them and just like holding it and just like snapping them. And even then, they didn't grow.
No, I could imagine. I've had similar experience. Yeah, and you're talking 10 years old in a not held in ideal conditions. But
it was in the Central Valley of California, like it's hot.
In a storage unit.
It was getting hot as fuck, but it was in a safe though, so it was like somewhat kind of, it was somewhat hermetically sealed, right? And they were in jars too. So I mean, I did get germination. I do have plants growing, so I know that I can get this to work. Like
wonderful.
And I will not give up. Like I am going to do this. Like it may take longer than I hope, or that I want it to be, but I am going to do this. So I'm stubborn as fuck, and this is what I do.
Awesome. This is what your future holds. More, I guess, more Punnett squares, and just going forward. I guess they're not called Punnett squares, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I think hopefully everyone watching knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Pundits are people that spin the news, I think, or something.
Spin the news.
Pundits.
Pundit? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I'm having a grammar fail. That pen was good. Thanks, Josh. Anyways, I'm looking through my notes, and I'm coming up. We're coming up on 2 hours. What kind of questions might you have, Andy, if the chat has come up with some questions and whatnot? Are we ready for like rapid fire section? The 10 questions of doom, as I like to call it. No? Okay, he's working on it.
If the chat's got any questions, if the chat wants to ask questions, I see them. I can answer questions.
Yes, I don't have chat in my. Sorry, guys. I don't have any. I'm out here. I bring you this instead of. Okay. Could you read that out for us? Us nearsighted folks.
Oh, it's not a question, but it's don't forget to smash that like and share this out. Show some love.
Oh, thanks. We appreciate that.
How's my snake doing? She's chilling. She's back there. The door's open. The cat's been running around. I'm sure you've seen them in the background at some point, but she's chilling in there. And you must have watched my last podcast I was on with Leighton Morrison. And someone had asked, like, what's up with the sideways grow tent in the back? And I actually built that into a snake enclosure for my red-tailed boa. Yeah. So I have, boa. And I have the AC Infinity climate control, like humidity controller and like exhaust fan and stuff. And so it keeps it like a perfect environment for her in there. And she sheds perfectly and stuff. It's really cool. Takes over. The drop is fast. In soil, no. I mean, it can if you're like, I guess probably if you're adding like a whole bunch of it, but I doubt it. You would see your soil pH drop really low if that was the case. But in like a fermented and anaerobic environment, yeah, absolutely. That's kind of like the whole point, is that it'll, keep pathogens from multiplying and stuff. It competitively excludes pathogens. So That's one
You
of the
just don't want to ferment your soil.
No, you don't want to ferment your soil.
It's possible too. You don't want to do that.
Do I think the same cannabinoid profile can affect men and women differently based on our physiology? That's a good question. I'm probably the wrong person to ask about that, though.
Anthropogenics.
I mean, how different is our physiology just other than like hormones and the different expressions that our hormones create in our bodies, or like our organs, some of them. I would say probably, I'd say that the factor of like our muscle mass and like our strength might be a larger contributing factor. I'm really not the right person to ask about that. What's happening?
Good to see you, Rusty.
Favorite organic amendment for potassium in your soil mixes? It depends. It depends on how depleted you are in potassium, and if you want something to be slow release for a long period of time, or if you want it to hit right away. Langbonite is great for slow release, long periods of time. Well, like kelp is going to be your quicker one. Are there any blackberry plants? Blackberry all over the place. Have you ever tried clipping the tips off the seeds? No. I'd be nervous to do that. But I can try it with this.
Yeah, I've heard about that before.
A women-specific flower line. I don't know. You know who would be a good person to ask that? Would be her
Riley.
Riley.
Dr. Kirk.
Yeah.
Riley Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
Camp.
Yeah, her. I would love to do a podcast with her one day. I've talked to her a little bit. But
yeah, you should bring her on
about that.
I'll talk to her, see if we can. I'll bring you guys together, collaborate for.
That'd be sick. And if we could get Murphy Murray, her and me on a podcast, that would be so sick.
Well, count me out.
Can you talk about the practices you do to get a smooth flavor smoke? And you can talk about white ash, how to get it. So there's a lot of discussion surrounding this, and what actually are the contributing factors to a smooth smoke. Some people really say that depleted nitrogen levels contribute to it. Some people say that increased potassium levels late in flower, as well as calcium levels, contribute to it. Some people say just a deficient plant that has fully gone into senescence is the culprit. I feel like my weed is always smooth, regardless of it being deficient at the end, going through senescence, or if it's green the whole way through. The whole white ash discussion, I don't really know if it carries a lot of weight, actually.
From my experience, the minor moisture content or possibly can create a darker ash, but in general, I feel it's really negligible, and the smokability of some flower, maybe it's just coincidental. Yeah. But my like heavier, hashier weeds are stickier and burn differently than some of the stuff that's not as like oily or greasy.
I've noticed that too.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I feel like it depends more on how oily and resinous the bud is than anything else to make white ash. And I think that it's kind of a weird standard that has become normalized in the industry, that we want white ash all the time, and like somehow that means that it's cleaner or better. I really don't think that that's true. But like like I've heard at competitions, they'll smoke a joint of it, and if it doesn't burn white, they won't even include it as something that they judge, which I think is just kind of nuts. And so it's kind of forcing people into this, it has to burn white or they won't even be included in like a judging circle. And if that's really your priority, just make sure your thing is gone fully into senescence, which I guess is just don't have too much nitrogen in the end. You know, make your plant cold, and so it starts, it stops uptaking nutrients, something like that.
PGR.
I really wouldn't subscribe to, like, if it's not white ash, it's not good. That's just my take on it.
I concur. The Pheno Hunter, I'm sure he agrees 100%. He's experienced.
What's we got here?
Is he off? No. Oh.
Yeah, the moisture, I think, is a big part of it. Yeah, anyone that whiny and picky can move on, for real. Check your trikes. Started cigarette propaganda. Yeah, that probably tracks.
Yeah, I remember that. I lived with a chemist that worked for the cigarette companies.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He was he owned like a nursing home, like adult foster homes. Really nice big house. He explained cigarettes to me back in 1992, and like how he made his fortune, and owns a foster house.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Hey, there you are.
I'm just gonna put stuff up if that's cool.
Welcome back, Andy.
Yeah, go ahead, Luna. If you see
perfect
questions you like, put them up.
Okay.
Yeah, good job.
I would. Yeah, I'm totally down to do a Women of Weed series. That would be awesome.
I think that would be amazing. I think I would love to see that happen.
Heck yeah.
The three of you women together, like, I think that would be a conversation we would need to set aside 3 hours for sure. There is so much
to talk about.
Yeah, there's just so much that you guys can just bounce back and forth off of each other. Like, I grab a notebook and sit aside.
There's a lot of voices there.
And Murphy and I talk pretty often. Her and I have become pretty close friends. Is the sale of seeds about to become illegal? Supposedly, yeah.
I mean, technically,
Oh, go for it.
I mean, technically, now that the order is signed, it is. The part about it, the enforcement is where we're in air. No, like. And then what happens? Like, it's all up in air right now. It really is. It's a mess.
Yeah.
I don't want to speculate too much on this forum. I'm sorry, it's not the proper place to gripe.
I think we would need to bring on like one of the cannabis lawyers to truly delve deep into like what the law is saying, because there's a lot of because I was reading it, and there's a lot of intricacies in the laws and in the wording of that law that on this podcast, on any podcast, short of having a lawyer on, like, we really couldn't do justice to everything that they're changing.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
A lot of conditions and carve outs for states and pre-existing programs and
It's
stuff.
interesting. The Women of Weed are about the industry.
I think it's a great idea. Just put it out there.
I know that they
but
exist.
I can't participate if it's a women and weed thing. Everybody understands that.
I'll help you out in the background. You just got to tell me what you want.
Yeah, so we hit 2 hours. Does anyone else have any questions they want to get out there before we wrap it up?
Yeah.
I do need something to go to the gym.
I do want. What about your raspberry moon cheese?
Huh?
If I find one of your raspberry moon cheeses that I think you would really like, that's full of that cheese flavor, do you mind if I send it to you?
Fuck yeah, dude. Yeah, send it to me. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Because last year I got one that was decent, but it just didn't have the longevity of flavor that I wanted out of it. But I can tell that there's probably going to be some in that batch that has that staining, that tarring flavor in there.
Yeah, definitely. Did you run into any problems during cultivation?
No, actually, I test the shit out of my plants. Like I put them through hell, and that plant did very well. I was
Great.
pretty impressed, which is why I will definitely run others.
Cool.
Which I'll definitely run the other seeds of it for sure. So.
Well,
and I'm all out of original raspberry moon cheese. So.
Ooh. Well, I got regs, so we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah, I have my own. I'm never gonna get rid of like my head stash ones, but like the ones that I'm distributing, they're all gone. But I will probably continue the line at some
Good
point.
for you.
Yeah.
Everybody can find Luna at Luna all day. Let's see, moongrownbotanicals.com.
Yeah.
Your Luna Soil, also on IG.
Yeah, Luna Soil is my backup, and then Luna All Day is my main one, which is LUNALLDAY, which I based off of the conversation in the chat. Most people I think already know me, but yeah, please follow me. And yeah, my website is moongrownbotanicals.com, and that's where all my seeds are listed. I also offer consulting services. I do have quite a few people I'm consulting for right now, but there are a couple of spaces open if anyone would like help. I do. I work with outdoor farms in Northern California, some greenhouse operations. I'm also doing work with a good handful of people back east, setting up living soil facilities in states coming online or trying to. And but I also am willing to help people in like tents and stuff like that. I have a Patreon Discord where I answer questions all the time, and people jump in with their plants and will have issues, and I help them diagnose them and fix them. I also have a ton of information on living soil systems for every single category you could possibly imagine, to self-educate yourself as well as ask questions in those categories to get information on them. I also have like my recipes for like my compost teas and top dress stuff and things like that.
Proof is in the pudding.
That's pretty much it.
Oh yeah.
So thanks for having me.
It's been so wonderful having you, Luna. Thank you for flipping the buttons, the ones and the twos.
Yeah.
Defino Hunter, do you have some words before I close this out?
No, I think that was a great one. Make sure everybody follows and watches Luna all day. Go on the YouTubes, go on all the socials. Support everyone. Support the community. Make sure you're going out. Touch some soil, y'all.
Yeah, touch some soil.
Absolutely. Touch some soil. It's getting warm out. Take care, y'all. Choose love.
Yeah. Have a great one, y'all.
Support dagga. Go ahead and close it out. Whoever wants to flip the switch.